So now I'll have to move over to Annette. Annette, hi, how are you? Welcome to the Speak Up for Women conference.
Hi, Christine. Thank you so much. And I'm so pleased to be here, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to read off my notes, and I hope you don't, nobody minds, but I'm too old. I can't memorize things, and I'm so terrified that I'll miss something important. So I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me to do this. I'm absolutely delighted. And you know, what I've heard so far is, it's mind-boggling for women. It really is. What a world. So I want to talk about Tuam Mother and Baby Home. And it was the death of a woman that put my mother on this conveyor belt of abuse that was Ireland's industrial school and mother and baby homes. My grandmother, Annie, died in 1936. My grandfather disappeared, and the children were marched through the centre of Galway, not to care, but to court, where my mother was sentenced to 2.5 years for the crime of being destitute. She was incarcerated, she was raped, she was abused in the place she was sent to as a 12-year-old girl. At 17, she was raped by the caretaker. And as I say, no man was ever charged or convicted for the rape of my mother, which happened when she was 17. This crime was placed solely on my mother, and that crime damaged and shaped her entire life. In 1916, there was a promise of a better future for all Irish citizens. Indeed, a declaration that promised equal rights for all. But 5 years later, Archbishop McQuaid and Eamon de Valera set up a barbarous, misogynistic system that placed certain women and children in internment camps. They would be denied basic human rights, and there would be no right of appeal. And their crime would be to fall outside the patriarchal Catholic Church's vision of what a woman's place in society should be. It's a chilling example to me of how easily women's rights can be taken away in a misogynistic state. A woman's place was to be the bearer of Catholic soldiers for the church. Contraception was banned, and any appeal against the role of childbearer for illness, mental health reasons would be flatly denied by a parish priest who was the overseer of the sexual life of his flock. There was only two kinds of women, saints and whoas. Saints had multiple pregnancies, wrecking their physical and mental health. Whoas were the fallen women, the offenders, and they would be dealt with by a church which made the rules and punished the offenders. The long-awaited Mother and Baby Home Commission report has been widely criticised for its failure to place any blame on the church or state, and instead blame fathers, families, society. I'm sure there will have been some families who would be happy to get rid of a troublesome daughter, took full advantage of a system that allowed them to dispose of that daughter. But the report shames itself with a shabby response to the question of 12, 15-year-old mothers, and a curious lack of investigation into why 12 or 15-year-old children came to be in the place in the first place, and why those children were imprisoned in this brutal regime. I have no truck with the narrative of the evil nuns. It reduces the story to a Victorian melodrama and excuses the behaviour of a state that abdicated all responsibility for its citizens. There never has been, and it seems there never will be, a rigorous examination of just how a government abdicated care of its own citizens and incarcerated women who had committed no crime. The state and the church set up a repressive regime that had parallels with Stalin's Russia, and the silencing and shaming continue to this day. The testimony of survivors talking about state-sponsored trafficking of children is compelling and was completely ignored by the Commission. The same Commission that states there was no forced compulsion to enter these institutions, and again ignores testimony from women who were hunted from England and brought back to the institutions by force. My own involvement with Tuam started with a newspaper article that talked about a shocking discovery in the west of Ireland, a sewage tank that was believed to hold the remains of up to 796 children. The newspaper posted the names of the children, and I scanned those names with dread. my mother had one conversation with me about a place called Tuam, a place where she gave birth to a baby girl who, the nuns told her, had died at 6 months old. My mother had been sent to another place of interment and the baby died alone. The pain and the sorrow was so overwhelming for my mother. She never referred to this again. And I imagined a small grave in an overgrown cemetery that we would have no hope of finding. That's the obscenity of Tuam. Sorry. The baby still lies unburied while the state and the church wrangle about the costs and laws. My mother died at 92. She had only told that story at 70, and it was still unresolved when she died. There was no resting place for the child of an offender. Some had no names. Some only lived hours, but each one would have been imprinted on the life of that mother. In spite of the abuse, the lack of care in pregnancy, and a painful birth, my mother could only speak about her bonny baby and the terrible loss. Where did the women find the strength to carry on in a society that silenced and shamed them? Did this same society ever think about the thrown away women and children and the loss of potential from each and every one? The artists, the painters, the politicians, the poets. Imagine a world where all that potential could have flowered. The Commission only looked at 12 homes across Ireland and concedes that up to 9,000 children died in those 12 homes. How many more were lost in total and will remain nameless and voiceless? I've visited Tuam many times. The people are lovely and supportive now and fully understand the wish that we want to take those children out of the sewage tank, identify them and give them back to families who wish to bury them with their own. The survivors break my heart. Their loss of a life free from blame and shame has shaped them in many ways. Denied education, basic healthcare, healthy loving attachments has kept them apart from community. They lack confidence and feel in some way that this has been their fault. Born wrong, but onto the wrong mother. Who created that shame? I hate to hear the women described as vulnerable victims. They were not. They were made vulnerable, but they were strong women and survived circumstances that are unimaginable. I've talked before about my impression of the Ireland I see today, and some of it still troubles me. The Ireland of the poets, male, who are forgiven many sins and are lauded and lionised. The statues to the women in Dublin caused great hilarity on the tourist buses. Molly Malone, the tart with the cart, Anne Olivia, the floozy in the jacuzzi. But what does it really say about respect and equality for women? Yeats's poem, in memory of Eve Gore-Booth and Con Markovitz, laments the loss of their beauty, but makes no tribute to their remarkable achievements. Eve is special to us in Manchester because she was part of the women's suffrage movement here. The two women were also very fortunate to have been born in a particular place in society that protected them from the ravages of church and state. Poor women, victims of rape, incest, domestic violence, had no such protection. They're still denied justice and a voice in a country that is only now coming to terms with what was done in the name of the church and the state. Gita Sereni has written about the dilemma facing Germany in the aftermath of the Second World War. And the only sane conclusion is that a country needs to face up to the injustices and make reparation and redress. I do not mean the endless rounds of state and church apologies that are utterly meaningless when they come at the start of the process. There were huge human rights abuses in the incarceration camps, and healing can only take place under a human rights process. I'm growing afraid that once again, women's voices are being silenced. When women are silenced and shamed, abuse follows. We simply cannot allow that to continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annette. That was really such a moving presentation altogether. I'm sure that all the audience feels the same. I'd really like to thank you for sharing such a personal family story with us.
Thank you.
So I'll be back with a question later. So now